So the official Church of England teaching on abortion, which is passed by a resolution, it's not one of those things that we are taught. You kind of have to look it up. One of the failures, in being in the Church of England is that we haven't spoken out about it.
Rev Dan Beesley is a vicar in the Church of England, serving the people of Chalfont St Giles Parish in the Diocese of Oxford. He is the founder of Beyond the Return Ministries, which in their words is all about helping disillusioned Christians find clarity, courage and Christ-centered formation in a confused church. This is also the purpose of Dan's YouTube channel, where he frequently addresses hot-button issues like abortion and the sanctity of life. And Dan joins me now. Rev Dan, thank you for joining us on SPUCTV. We'll get straight into it then. So I'm going to start with what is really a lowball question. What is the official teaching of the Church of England when it comes to abortion?
Well, that's an interesting one. When we come through theological college and things like that, it's not one of those things that we are taught, like thinking about it, you kind of have to look it up. So when you say, what's the official teaching? The first thing is, what is the official teaching? And actually, it is quite interesting because it comes from the General Synod. So when something comes out the General Synod, it has to be debated and voted on. And so the official Church of England teaching on abortion, which is passed by a resolution, talks about abortion as a grave matter, but also affirms that life in the womb deserves protection, but also, as many people do nowadays, talks about like there are tragic circumstances and where abortion would be necessary. So in that way, you get these complex situations, but the church's official teaching, and it's been reaffirmed time after time, is that life begins in the womb, and it would be, I would say, against abortion.
So abortion is a grave evil with caveats, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much where I would say society's gone. That was back in 1983, that they passed that. So, it's what was interesting though, even though the Abortion Act came in the 60s, it's taken to 1983 to get to that point, to get a position, or to actually say that we have a position, rather than saying, this is what we believe. Do we have to put a resolution through? But I suppose that's what happens when you get into a big institution.
Yeah, so that was my impression, that was the position of the church, sort of not coming down hard one way or another. And I'm going to preface this next question, Dan, with a quote from the now apparent Archbishop of Canterbury, Sarah Mullally, but a quote she made back in 2012, where she says, "I would suspect that I would describe my approach to this issue as pro-choice rather than pro-life. Although if it were a continuum, I would be somewhere along it, moving towards pro-life when it relates to my choice, and then enabling choice when it related to others." So the kind of, not for me, abortion not for me, but for others, that sort of approach. I'm, personally pro-life, but not for others, but for others by all means. And I suppose that tees up this question nicely then, because there seems to be a range of opinions in the Church of England on the issue of abortion and on related life issues, from one Archbishop of Canterbury to another. And from that quote, as that quote suggests, now to be fair, that was 13 years ago, Mullally has since spoken about abortion in different terms. But even within one Archbishop of Canterbury, there can be differences of opinion. So why would you say there is such a range of opinions in one church?
Well, the Church of England is broad, isn't it? We got Anglo-Catholics, evangelicals, liberal theology as well. We are like the via media when we first started out. So we hold this very broad tradition. We hold all the traditions very broadly. We've seen that in the recent LLF debates within the Church of England, how you can have very different interpretations on a certain doctrine and theology. I think also in the Church of England, we have to understand that there are 42 dioceses, and the dioceses are actually independent of each other. And so the bishops do hold different theologies. They will lead their dioceses differently, that even their financial aspects are all different. And so I think that's where you will get this very broad interpretation, rightly or wrongly, on abortion, because each diocese will hold, the bishop will hold their views on many different doctrines, but they don't have to all agree with each other, because since the beginning of the Church of England, and even now, I have very good Anglo-Catholic friends, but I'm an evangelical. We worship differently on a Sunday. So I think that kind of mixing, as it were, of the broadness of the Church of England and the individual of the diocese. The next Archbishop of Canterbury could be a very conservative person and hold a very different view. But that's what the Anglican Church and the Church of England tries to hold on to, this kind of via media. And I think it does bring then a lot of differences in interpretation, as well as then bringing in the modern secular thinking, which is very much seeped into the Church of England as well.
Now, I don't want to labour the point too much, but as an observer looking in, it looks to me like that kind of confusion, and it may be even apathy towards abortion-related life issues from the hierarchy, has bred apathy amongst the congregation. Is that a fair assessment? Well,
in the Church of England, they do look to the bishops, and it has gone that way. The church and the way that we operated with the parochial system, the power used to be locally with a local parish priest who knew not only their congregation but their parish, lived amongst the parish for many years, and it changed, and so it's become more central. You've got the national church. I would say there's now two different church structures: the national church, your archbishops, your bishops, and then the local church. And I think the local church now is where we're kind of seeing change, even if we disagree a lot on a lot of different doctrines with the national church and the archbishop and the house of bishops, which we see every time General Synod meets, how the laity and the clergy are voting very differently in numbers wise to the house of bishops.
Yeah. So Dan, another thing, many clerics, both in the Church of England and, it must be said, the Catholic Church, simply refuse to preach on the topic of abortion. That's something that I've found. I think for fear of offending or upsetting anyone in the congregation. Now, how do you broach this subject? What is really quite a sensitive subject?
It is a sensitive subject now, because I think one of the failures, it being in the Church of England, is that we haven't spoken out about it. You speak to the Catholics, and even if you aren't religious, where they are. Most people, I would say, would know they would be against abortion. But in the Church of England, when you've got bishops and clergy arguing for abortion, or it's allowable, and not just in exceptional circumstances, but in many different circumstances, there gets a confusion out there. And the other thing in the world, because not everyone in my church is Christian all their life, they come into and they find Jesus in their faith. With so many people, I think so many women, it's like 1 in 3, is it, that have had an abortion in their lifetime. You get people now coming into the church who have been through that. And so there is a pastoral responsibility in how we talk. And it's a big thing, because we are on the back foot, because it feels like if you're going to speak about it in the Church of England, you have to explain where we are, because it's not known. And so for some people, it will be a shock. I didn't think you thought that. I've had that on other different topics. Oh, I didn't know you were believing that way. So if you're doing it from the pulpit, and that's the first place people hear, you want to, and you have to preach truth. I mean, abortion for me, after not preaching the gospel or preaching the false gospel, is the number one most important issue. And so I do take it very seriously. But I also understand that people coming in, when you're preaching, as much as I hold that I would just say, I wish abortion was gone, we need to meet people where they're at. And that brings then a confidence. And I think there is something about a confidence within the clergy, and perhaps the bishops. Remember, all bishops and even archbishops were once clergy. But in how we speak about and broach this subject. So from the pulpit, it's always a one-way interaction. and you can't gauge where people are or what people are thinking. So I think that there is a loss of confidence there, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't speak about this. You know, the other day, we're going through a sermon series on the Psalms, so it comes up more. The other thing that we have is lectionary. Lectionary doesn't normally lend itself to these topics. It has to be brought in rather than it's naturally there. But I preached on Psalm 139, which talked, about God knitting us in the womb. And so we can preach about this, and it's there, and it's saying, in one way, life begins at conception, which to many people sitting there, they might think, well, no, it doesn't. I've never been told that. So it can be a start of a conversation, but I think it will come back again. Why don't people preach on it? I think there's a lack of confidence because we feel probably that we are on the back foot, and there is a pastoral responsibility of people, how they will react hearing something for the first time from the pulpit.
And for speaking so boldly, honestly, but also with love on the issue, have you seen much pushback?
No, because the thing about being a parish priest is to be known and who you are. And so I've been through it. If I slightly just go off a very Anglican thing, but the LLF, I hold that marriage is between a man and a woman. I did a video, in a sense, about this. I spoke about it online. I got into local papers. I got into a local Facebook group. And it was only a year after I got here. And it was pretty difficult. People really, in one way or another, that's the first time they got introduced to me. They were seeing me as homophobic or a bigot. I've been here 4 years now, 3 years since that. But I'm more involved in the community. People are meeting me more, speaking to me, and they're going, well, actually, you're not like I first thought. You're very much involved in all this. You've got a really caring heart, but you hold these views. And so it's about building that relationship and being that local parish priest, so you can, in these complex times, speaking to people. Because we have to admit, in the Church of England, the world and the church has never been so far apart. People don't go to church all the time, and they don't really understand what the church believes, because, again, coming back, that national church isn't standing there, and archbishops, when they come in, are not standing there saying, this is what we believe. Again, you will get that with the Catholics. That's one thing that I admire from them, but not from the Church of England.
And Dan, I first came across you just a couple of months ago. It was your the video you put on YouTube, basically lamenting the recently released abortion stats from 2023, pertaining to England and Wales, which saw that almost 300,000 unborn children were killed in one single year in England and Wales. Now, what kind of a spiritual effect do you think that the killing of almost 300,000 unborn children, knit in their mother's womb, as you said, Psalm 139, what kind of spiritual effect do you think that has on a nation, on a society?
What really got me, I got 2 kids, one's 18 and one's 10. And, the 10-year-old is getting ready this year to move up to secondary school. And I go into primary schools, I always have since I became a priest 11 years ago. And to think, you change those statistics, which can seem abstract to some people in one way or another because the number's so huge, into the reality of, in every school, there's usually about 30 kids in each primary school class. To say that a third has never even made it to school is not only just sobering, it's a tragedy. It's a massive tragedy that there's 10 other children in my daughter's class or in that cohort that will, in the future, that will never be there. And that's in one class, across each year. And for me to stand there doing an assembly, just imagining there's just so many children that just aren't there, because there's something that comes back in the spiritual aspect to the value of life and the sanctity of life. And I think we've lost that. We really have. Abortion has become something that is, you do by a pill, which it's so easy to do now. And when you look at the spiritual life of the nation in that sense. There's no dignity for the child in the womb. It's something that can just be disposed of. I think we care more about our recycling now. Putting them, if I don't put my cardboard out in the right place, it won't get taken. If I put it in the blue bin instead of the green bin, because you're mixing the cardboard. But we can dispose of a child just so easily, and there's no argument, there's no pushback. And I think the child in the womb is probably one of the most today, the most vulnerable positions that you could ever be. And the survival rates, I mean, go back to the times in Africa, they used to have many children because they used to die. And so they would, to keep the family going. And medicine came in, the families went down, the number of children, because they were surviving better. But we've kind of gone back to that. They're not dying after they're born, they're dying before they're born. And I think I don't know if soulless in that sense is such a strong word, but when we're talking about children dying in the womb in such horrific ways, has the nation, have people lost their soul and their compassion over children not recognizing what they are in the womb?
Yeah, I think if I were to sum up the attitude of most Britons when it comes to abortion, it's one of apathy. First of all, as you alluded to with your own congregation, as you found in the last 4 years, first of all, not knowing much about what goes on, about the fact that almost 300,000 children are killed on an annual basis, knowing how abortion works. There's just a lack of knowledge twinned with apathy. One thing I appreciated about the video you put out was, whilst you were being incredibly firm that you are against abortion in all cases, it was also offset by the compassion of the gospel that you really do want the best for people.
And I think that's one thing that we got to realize. We could say society is judged on how it treats its weakest members. So what are we teaching society? What is society growing up in? Because the Abortion Act has come in so many years ago, and now it's as generations have gone on, it's quite normal. I remember being at school 30 years ago and a girl just having an abortion, and she just said, oh, I've just had an abortion. I think I was pregnant. Oh, I was pregnant. I think I just had an abortion. Whether it's true or not, it's just, we accepted it. It was just part of our life as growing up. Oh, you made a mistake. Here's the answer. At no point was there a shock and horror, even 30 years ago, as saying that was a child. How could you just come into school one day and announce it? True or not, we took it as read. And we just thought, oh, okay, that's how you get out of this. So again, it comes back to teaching. I think the church is in the place to speak about these things, to educate and to let know of the sanctity of life of a child in the womb, to teach society that, if you treat your weakest members like this, what's it really showing about you? And I think that's a challenge.
Now, Dan, we've spent enough time lamenting the kind of confusion in the Church of England on the issue, but it's not all doom and gloom. Now, last year at the March for Life in London, last September, Bishops Martin Warner and Richard Jackson of the Church of England were marching in attendance, made their presence felt. As far as I'm concerned, that was a first, and that was great to see involvement from the Church of England. In the same month, September last year, Church of England Voices for Life, which is an initiative for pro-life Anglicans, was established. Is something changing for the better in the Church of England?
Yeah. I'll bring in one more lament just before, because where I live in my village, it's not only the church, but the village is named after the saint, and it's our Saints' Day on the first weekend in September. So I can never get down, but I can this year because I'm on sabbatical. So I've always wanted to go there, but I haven't been able to. But I think now having the bishops there, and again, the bishops are important because they are seen, well, in their status, as it were. I think just having one person there from an Anglican perspective is always good. But I think one of the things, again, not harking back to LLF, but I've seen this, is the fact that we've got laity and clergy just come into the church and bringing very worldly views in, and and mixing it up with their theology, what the whole living in love and faith process has done has made people think, well, what do I think about same-sex blessings? And it hasn't stopped there. They've gone, what do I think about remarriage after divorce? What do I think about the sanctity of life and abortion? And I think we are becoming more theological, and we're going back to these doctrines and saying, where do I land on this? Because this is a moral issue, which people will ask, or I'm asking myself. And that's why you see the Voices for Life group spring up. Because when you find what you believe and you hold it, you want to express it as well. And also that thing of people coming together, it's always safe in a group. So it's, if people are there, I wouldn't knock it, because it gives people confidence, and it might, being in the group, give them more confidence later on to speak about it in their sermons and things like that. But I think we're looking at people studying their theology and really understanding what they believe, and then the next part of that is stepping out. Or it might be joining a Facebook group. It might be seeing the advert for the March for Life in London. It might be saying, well, I see some bishops are going or some friends are going. I'll go and do that and add my voice to it. So I think that, yeah, you're right. There is a huge change and more confidence. And we will be stronger if we stand together.
And you mentioned, Dan, people coming into the church in adult life. It's a reminder to people like you and I who are, perhaps steeped in Christianity, if we're, cradle Catholic, cradle Anglican, to have a bit of sympathy for those who are coming in with and understanding why they're coming into the church with these otherwise worldly views. It's all they're getting from the media, so it's entirely understandable. Now, Dan, both...
Well, I'll just quickly add to that. I was speaking to some Gen Z kids the other day about the world that they're growing up in this kind of fascination, not fascination, but how they're looking for something beyond themselves, because they were told they could be whatever they wanted to be and do whatever they wanted to do. And that even when I said to them, they absolutely agreed. Their identity, they're told, wasn't even formed in the womb by society. They're told that your sexuality was given to you at birth, that the doctor assigned your sex at birth. So it kind of made them feel, well, what happened in the womb? Who am I? So there was a huge thing about identity. So we're not even, when we speak to them, we're now going back saying, well, actually, as Christians, you were made at that first moment, and you would have seen the video going around, that video of the sperm going into the egg and light coming, and it's just so powerful. And they're speaking about Jesus and the Holy Spirit coming over Mary, and in her womb, God and man coming together at that one moment, not later on, but the conception of Jesus proves that life begins when God and man came together. That's the ultimate proof. But for them, that's a foreign language, because and they agreed with this. The propaganda that they had, and it is propaganda, is what was before was nothing. You were assigned a sex at birth, and I think we have to now work through these things with people. And that for Ephesians 4:15 is about speaking truth and love. As you said, I hold that abortion is one of the worst things ever in this planet, ever, after not preaching the gospel, because that is a salvational thing. But people just take abortion as a matter of fact and as a normal thing. So how do I take what I hold so strongly and speak into a world which thinks, well, I only really began my life when the doctor said I was a boy or a girl?
Yes, but you're right. You've almost got to walk it back with people. Now, Dan, moving on to politics, both reform and Restore Britain. Restore Britain, very new, of course, Rupert Lowe's new political party. Both of them are emerging as serious contenders, I would say, towards the right of British politics. And both, of course, in the title of their political party, both refer to a return to things as they were. But can we really return to things as they were? Can we reform or restore Britain without first stopping what is a state-sanctioned killing of, as we've said, almost 300,000 unborn children every single year in this country?
I don't think so, because what they would say is we'll go back to what we believe is something safe. So, they might just try to get it back to 10 or 12 weeks or something like that, when most abortions are done within that time frame anyway. I don't think they would abolish abortion. And this is a political thing, where actually what we need to talk about is a moral thing. And that's where the church really comes in, because the politics can say whatever they say. And the trust amongst politicians, even though, we might hope Restore and Reform will carry out what they say, and that will protect some life, they won't fully get rid of it. And so there is a moral thing which we need to overcome in the church. We need to speak about the sanctity of life more. We need to find that confidence, in the Anglican Church. So I'd love to see the Archbishop of Canterbury and York and every bishop affirm that life begins at conception and abortion is wrong. I do get why they say in these certain exceptions, because that does happen. I knew someone when I was, before I, in what we call my sending church, before I got sent out to be a priest, a lady there was pregnant, and they found that she had cancer, and the choice for her was you do an abortion or you carry on with your birth and you die. It was a horrible situation. So there are those rare exceptions where you get these cases, but they sometimes speak about the exception being, the rule. And actually we say, no, there are exceptions, but the majority of abortions aren't like that. But we also need to speak about things like the sanctity of the family and the beauty of motherhood. It's easier to say, as we said before, we can get rid of this baby because it's a mistake, rather than saying, well, you know what, you've got pregnant, but the beauty of motherhood is this. The beauty of, their first steps, the time that you get to breastfeed your child if you're able to, the time that they start going to primary school, and those photos, this is the first day, this is the last day of primary school. We don't talk about those things. We don't talk about the beauty of what it is to be a mother and a father and a family. And this is where the morality comes into it, as well as the beauty of what being a family, what motherhood is, what fatherhood is, and what childhood is. But at the same time, we don't want to just put it in people's heads, and I think people might think this, that everybody who has an abortion is in a stable, loving relationship, and it's just an inconvenience. There are a lot of people, and you know this, who are getting abortion because the man has run away, or it's in a situation where it's not going to be good for them. And so the easiest thing for them to do is get an abortion. And that's where the church really needs to step in, to acknowledge this is a reality, and to show what love looks like without the judgment. Because we can be seen, and this is what I was trying to do in the video, is hold to the truth, but try to love the person and not to judge them in the situation because it's happened. Let's just deal with it. But then the argument is as well, we've also lost as a church, our teaching on sex outside marriage. If I'm not at the age to have children anymore or want children, if it happened, if we had that accident, as we would call it, I'm in a stable, loving relationship with my wife. And so that would be okay. It would be difficult, but it would be okay. Sex outside marriage is, you get someone pregnant, that brings up a lot of difficulties in many different ways, not just as simple that you're pregnant, but there are so many other factors. And we've also lost the confidence of the church to say, this is why God says not to have sex outside marriage. And we don't teach that anymore at all.
Now, Dan, one thing we observe here at SPUC is a lot of people saying, I identify as pro-life and I want to help the pro-life movement, but what can I do? Do you have something for me to do, essentially? Now, what practical things do you think that people, whether they're in the Church of England or not, your congregation or not, if someone's coming to you and saying, what can I do to help the pro-life movement? What would you tell them?
Well, the first is always is to pray. The power of prayer is huge. And even if you have to pray in an abortion zone and get arrested, it's pray. Pray for what is happening, and not just in our local areas, but across the world. Because abortion gets brought in, and this is the reality, that abortion gets brought in to make it safe. And we have to understand that if abortion got taken away, then people are doing backstreet abortions once again. And so we have to pray for abortion to stop, but also at the same time to imagine what can keep women safe in those situations, especially in abusive relationships. So it's not just stop, but how can we be wise in this situation? I think one of the big things which people don't want to do, but they must, is understand exactly what abortion is. Now, we know it's horrendous. I've looked at it and I didn't want to look at it. I got my wife to look at it because she didn't want to look at it. But it's to understand what is happening to those babies, whether it's a pill or the forceps, and to go through that trauma, because it's not happened to us, and we got to get over that thing. Because once we know what's happening, our hearts will be broken for what is happening to those children. And when our hearts are broken, then I think it gives us more purpose to do something about it. But a lot of people won't want to do that because, like I said, it is horrendous. And then to question what we're doing locally in our churches and in our communities. Is there anything around us to help these people? If someone gets pregnant, whether they're 52 or 14, and they're thinking about this, where can they go? Is there any service? Now, there are lots of services. The church doesn't need to be, in a way, to become the social services. The church can become a signpost and then be there to support these people spiritually and pastorally, because there are, in areas where churches aren't equipped now because of volunteers, there are charities and other places that are equipped to help them, but not the way that we can do pastorally and spiritually and to walk with them. They can do other things practically. So I think perhaps those three things is pray, not just for abortion to end, but what will help people in the future and what it would look like, to see the reality of abortion and to get ourselves over that, for God to break our heart for those who have died, and to question what we have locally to help the person, the girl down the road that might get pregnant.
And even more basic than that, Dan, being willing to talk to family and friends about the issue, to remind them that in fact you are pro-life, even or especially if it's uncomfortable. Dan, thank you for joining us, and thank you for speaking boldly to your congregation and your community on an issue that affects so many people. Thank you very much.
Thank you.